Yo, party people, January 8th, number 2. So we're in the last book of Nehemiah. So I just finished where Nehemiah had come to do all of the work to, build the wall and following in Ezra's footsteps. There'd been 3. He was the third person to bring back groups to Israel to rebuild everything. And we see that after he had done all the great work, reestablished everything, everything was going great. He went back to the king because it was a temporary assignment. He went back to Artaxerxes because he worked for the king. And then he hears bad things are going on, right? He hears some bad rumors about what's happening in Israel. He goes back and he finds that they had allowed Moabites and who is it? Let me make sure I get the right words. Ammonites and Moabites to come in and be a part of the worship of God. They're not allowed in the temple. God made it very clear because of them hiring Balaam a long time ago to curse the nation of Israel, that God had refused to allow them certain access to the worship in the temple. They had allowed them in, so they weren't following the law there. So he kicked them out of there. And then he also found out that the high priest had allowed Tobiah, the ancient enemy of the Jewish people, the entire time they were trying to rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. This Tobiah dude was against them, and he was causing all kinds of trouble, threatening them physically, tried to murder Ezra. I believe it was Ezra. They tried to lure him out of the city so they could assassinate him. It was because of Tobiah and the people that were with him that they had to wear weapons while they were building the wall. They had guards set up all along the wall to blow a trumpet in case there was a physical attack. I mean, it was just insane, the things that they did to try and stop the rebuilding of the temple. And here, the high priest who had married into the family of Tobiah had allowed Tobiah not only in Jerusalem, into the city itself, but into the temple. He actually set up a room for him, removed things that were supposed to be storing for the Levites and for the work of the Lord, removed those items and allowed this man to have multiple rooms in the temple. I mean, it was just atrocious. And so we just finished where Nehemiah came back and threw out all of his stuff, and he reoriented the temple and set that up. But we also found out that we just saw that they had not been giving the Levites their portions. Right? And this has been a problem since the fall, right? Back when on the map where you see where they had fallen here in Assyria and here to Babylon, that was a major problem with why they couldn't get enough Levites to come back with them, because they had their main source of income is supposed to be from the tithes and the offerings, right? So it says here that they had, in that very short period of time, they'd already had to go back to serving, working the land to provide for their families. And probably, I mean, they don't say this in the commentary, but this is my conjecture. Probably when people are seeing that the high priest is allowing their ancient enemy to live in the freaking temple, people were probably like, I ain't going to give them any money. I mean, it's like even now within the church, when you see corruption within your church, it turns you off to the things of God, and it turns you off to certainly giving money to provide for them. So I can see where this would have been a huge problem. So when he comes back, Nehemiah comes back, it says, I also realized, so this is verse 10, chapter 13. I also realized that the portions for the Levites had not been given them, for each of the Levites and the singers who did the work had gone back to his field. So I contended with the rulers and said, why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. Then all Judah brought the tithe of the grain and the new wine and the oil to the storehouse. And I appointed as treasurers over the storehouse. So these are new people he's putting in place: Shelemiah the priest and Zadok the scribe, and of the Levites, Pedaiah, and next to them was Hanan the son of Zakur, the son of Mattatiah, for they were considered faithful, and their task was to distribute to their brethren. So I just made a note from the commentary. It says, Shelemiah represented the temple priests, so the people that were doing the work inside the temple. Zadok represented the judicial section of the priests. So remember, they were officers, and they functioned as judges as well, kind of doing the outside of the temple type of work. And then Pedaiah represented the Levites proper, and then Hanan represented the singers and the porters. So all of the different sections were represented in these new assignments to these people. Remember me, oh my, and so then this is Nehemiah praying to God. Remember me, oh my God, concerning this, and do not wipe out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God and for its services. And verse 15, in those days I saw people in people in Judah treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves and loading donkeys with wine, grapes, figs, and all kinds of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I warned them about the day on which they were selling provisions. Men of Tyre also dwelt there, and who brought in fish and all kinds of good and sold them on the Sabbath to the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. Okay, so they're violating the Sabbath. All of these things, and then you're going to see later on in the very end is they're intermarrying again with foreign people, and their children are not speaking the native language. So then again, so he's going to come against them for this Sabbath stuff. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said to them, what evil thing is this that you do, by which you profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do thus, and did not our God bring all this disaster on us and on this city? Yet you bring added wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath. So it was at the gates of Jerusalem, as it began to be dark before the Sabbath, that I commanded the gates to be shut, and charged that they must not open till after the Sabbath. Then I posted some of my servants at the gates, so that no burdens would be brought in on the Sabbath day. Now the merchants and sellers of all kinds of wares lodged outside Jerusalem once or twice. Then I warned them and said to them, why do you spend the night around the wall? If you do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time on, they came no more on the Sabbath. So what was happening, the commentary said, is so he shut the gates. But you know what people were doing, because it didn't restrict people from going back and forth. So they just set up outside. And then the people in Jerusalem were going out and just doing business with them there. I mean, it was just so ridiculous. Then I warned them and said to them, so then they didn't allow them to even spend the night there, because because it was still violating the law. And I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves, and that they should go and guard the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. So he actually had the Levites functioning on the Sabbath day to guard the Sabbath day for the nation of Israel, which is kind of interesting. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of your mercy. In those days I also saw Jews who had married women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab, and half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, and could not speak the language of Judah, but spoke according to the language of one of the other peoples. So I contended with them, and cursed them, struck some of them, and pulled out their hair, and made them swear by God, saying, you shall not give your daughters as wives to their sons, nor take their daughters for your sons or yourselves. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin by these things? Yet among many nations there was no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, pagan women caused even him to sin. Should we then hear of your doing all this great evil, transgressing against our God by marrying pagan women? So he's saying, who are you that you think that they're not going to corrupt you? They corrupted Solomon, who was beloved by God. So again, and this was already addressed by Ezra, right? And they're doing it again. And one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest, was a son-in-law to Sanballat, the Horonite. Therefore I drove him from me. So this guy was married, he was again married into the family of their enemy, who tried to stop them from rebuilding Jerusalem. This Sanballat guy, you see his name throughout Ezra, and then again in Nehemiah. And so this is just showing he had an enemy within his inner circle. And he expelled him completely from the community. Remember them, O my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. So what he's saying there is that by intermarrying, they were restricted who they could marry and the type of person they could marry. And so not only was he marrying their enemy, but he was marrying outside of the restrictions that were required by God for the Levitical priesthood. And so it was corrupting the whole thing. Remember them, O my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. Thus I cleanse them of everything pagan. I also assign duties to the priests and the Levites, each to his service, and to bringing the wood offering and the first fruits at appointed times. Remember me, O my God, for good. So that's how it ends. So it's kind of sad. I mean, it's kind of like, again, you see everything he had established, everything they had done, they've already fallen back into doing things that had originated the original falls, of the entire kingdom, right? So it's actually kind of tragic, but it shows us how we can never, relax in our walk with God. To some degree, we have to constantly be checking ourselves and recognizing that, without him, we're lost. Without Jesus, we're lost. So that's all I had for you. Tomorrow we will start Esther, although in our reading today, one of my favorite prophetic books is the prophetic book that we just started reading today. It was Amos. I thought about starting that. All right. Anyways, we'll see. So read your Bible. Jesus is coming. Peace.